Dr. Kate Russo, thank you very much for coming on. It's great to have you here.
Good morning, and you can call me Kate. Oh,
thanks. It's just a quick way of explanation to you and our guests. Obviously, you know, with your title, you've earned it and deserve it. But thanks very much. Look, I think we'll dive right into the interview. What's a nice, well-educated, professionally trained lady like you doing chasing shadows? What's going on with that?
Well, do you know, it sort of struck me, it came out of the blue for me because I didn't actually know I was an eclipse chaser. All I was doing was just traveling around the world. I'm a typical Aussie girl. I travel a lot. And from a young age, I just had this, you know, almost like a bucket list, we call it now, of things that I would like to experience in the world and places I'd like to go. And I love nature. And on that list was seeing a total solar eclipse because it just sounded really interesting and fascinating. And the opportunity came in 1999 when I was in the UK. So I saw my first total solar eclipse. I got into the path near France. And, you know, I thought it would just be something that I would see and, you know, I'd carry on traveling. But oh my God, what an amazing experience. And I had no idea it was going to really transform my life. And I had no idea I was going to become an eclipse chaser and develop a whole extra, almost an alternative career pathway afterwards. So sometimes we just fall into things, even you think your life's going that way and you fall in over here. But I'm still a psychologist. I still do those things. It's just that over the years, my alternative career pathways have sort of merged a bit more, and I'm able to make a little bit more, do more of what I love and enjoy, and you know, love sharing the passion around.
Well, that's great. And we are gonna focus on the shadow chasing because that is cool. But really briefly, can you tell me, like, what do you specialize in with psychology and stuff like that? Like, what do you do with that?
In psychology. So I'm a qualified clinical psychologist. I trained in Australia and also my doctorate in the UK. So it's many years of research and study. In the UK, I was actually specializing in pediatrics. So working with children in hospital settings. So my area really is health. I've returned to Australia in 2018 and I'm now working in private practice, and I specialize working in adults, and I still really focus on health. I love that area. And I also have a research expertise. And so I have quite a leadership role in a research methodology called interpretative phenomenological analysis. IPA for short, because that's a bit of a mouthful. But in fact, that's why I've really combined my research approach to eclipse chasing, because I understand that the totality experience is so unique and different, and I wanted to know more about it. And I thought it was just the perfect opportunity to be able to research it. And, you know, who else is better qualified to be able to do that? You know, it's like my two areas were really combining into one.
It does. That is really serendipitous, and I understand what phenomenology is actually because I'm a bit of a Jordan Peterson fan. It's kind of introduced me to that, and as a consequence of that, I've read a little bit of Jung. Okay, and it's more, I haven't read the actual original sources yet. I'm still reading the interpretive papers and all that sort of stuff. But really briefly for our listeners, so that they can get the context and understanding that I have, could you tell them quickly what phenomenology is?
Yeah, and I'll put it in the context of the total solar eclipse experience. It's really our lived experience. So what happens to us when we experience a total solar eclipse? So we try and get to the essence of what that is, because often you'll find when you talk to someone and say, you know, well, what is it about the total eclipse? What is it? How do you feel during totality? People are likely just to say, you know, awesome. And then they kind of like struggle to find the words. They really struggle to convey what it is. And it's because our lived experience often involves things that we can't put words to. You know, it's our embodied emotions. It's our the way we think about things, the way we make sense of our world. And so what a phenomenologist does is try to capture all those things, how we make sense of the lived experience that we have, and to convey it. So you have to get into people's life worlds to be able to interpret and then find the commonality amongst those interpretations. So that's what I've done with my first book. Really was trying to tease out what's the essence of the total eclipse experience. You know, what makes the total eclipse experience so different and unique.
And look, that's such a cool way of putting it. Look, I can one of the things I like about modern science now is that we've started to talk about phenomenology and take it seriously. But I understand science's ambivalence towards phenomenology because it's so subjective. And the whole thing about science is it's about removing subjectivity and moving towards the objective. But what that results in is like people equating science with the philosophy of materialism, which, again, I'm not seeking validation. If you disagree, that's fine. But I kind of don't think that that's the full picture. You know what I mean? Because human beings experience things. It's not that there's not an objective truth. That's not my argument. You know, when we're like, light is light. And the fact that some people are colorblind and some people perceive light differently doesn't mean that there is not an objective way of measuring it and that light doesn't exist, but it's experienced in different ways. And to not take that into account, rather than being an objective picture, it's lacking something. It's not the full picture. Like, you're not getting it. You know what I mean?
And I often think it's not about this or that, you know, the objective versus the subjective. I think it's about, we can learn a lot from what our objective reality is by looking at our subjective experience of it. And it's that thing also that if you try and average out our experiences, you sort of get this flat, lifeless event. But in fact, if you're able to share your subjective experience of it, it actually makes it so much more powerful, because the average doesn't tell us much about the individual experience. And I think everyone working in astronomy actually fully acknowledges our subjective experience about what it's like to look up at the universe and look up at our world above us. And I think everyone, acknowledges that we feel things like, we feel that sense of insignificance because we understand how vast our universe is. And when we have that full appreciation of it, it really allows us to think differently about things. It almost like expands our mind in a way. It allows us to have a much broader framework on things and puts our little everyday concerns and problems into a bit more of puts it in perspective, really. And relating this to eclipses, it's like the other day, I don't know if you were lucky enough to experience the lunar eclipse that we had, when we were able to look and stand and look at the shadow of our Earth on the moon. And when you really think about what's happening there, you've got our Earth, which is now obviously an object in the sky that is casting a shadow upon the moon, which is another object in the sky. And as the shadow progressed, you could actually see the moon as a spherical object in the sky, rather than just a flat thing that we tend to really take for granted. So it's at those moments we really understand how vast the universe is, and we experience the universe in 3D. So I think our subjective experiences and our lived experiences of these things add to our appreciation and understanding of science. So it's never an either or.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think both sides might make mistakes, because there's always been this complete and utter focus on, again, it's not even really science, it's the philosophy of materialism. But I've got to be honest, like, I do follow something you've probably picked up in our conversations. I'm a geek, and I do follow. I'm out now. Thanks.
Oh no, I'm a geek. Let's embrace our inner geekness.
For many years, I've been living a lie as someone. I'm a geek. I just want to come out. But one of the things, and I do deal a bit with reading policy and stuff like that, and but I think there's a bit of an overcompensation now too, putting lived experience as the center rather than, like you said, I think we need that yin and yang like mix. I think what science, the process of science needs to do. Actually, if I can kind of plug another interview that I did with Professor Peter Harrison last week, that was really, really a great conversation, almost as good as this one. I can make the observation. The relationship between, with him, it was specifically about the religious context of science. So I suppose the nature between faith and reason, between inspiration and explanation, and really the consensus, spoiler alert, the consensus we sort of came to was that you can't have one without the other. And it's the idea that you can just follow science is kind of wrong, because behind any scientific thing, like looking at an eclipse, so doing that rather than something else, there's a certain value statement behind that. Value statement is it's worth looking at. There's a reason, there is a point, there is something that I can learn from this. So you can't really just follow science, you know what I mean, in the truest sense of the word. Anything that's being investigated has a value statement, an implicit value statement behind it. But yeah, that's really cool. And I didn't think that we'd end up discussing this, and it's kind of awesome. But look, we will get, although that wasn't off topic, can you tell me how many totalities have you actually seen?
So when we use the word totality, we're actually describing the total eclipse of the sun, which is when the Earth's shadow is cast upon the moon's shadow is cast upon the Earth, and you actually have to get into that very narrow path of totality, which is the moon's central shadow. So that's why we're called eclipse chasers, because we chase into that path and we chase the moon's shadow. I've seen 12 total solar eclipses. So I started in 1999. And the last two have been interrupted a little bit because of COVID. But, you know, those 12 eclipses have taken 20 years of my life. So that's pretty cool. And I am a geek, but I didn't actually prepare these figures because I've actually calculated how much time I've spent in the moon's central shadow. And I actually don't have that figure with me right now, so I'm sorry. But us eclipse chasers like to do that. We can actually map where we are. And Bill Kramer is an eclipse chaser who's created this website where we can all log where we've been and how much time we've been in the moon's central shadow. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, look, I hope that you're not too much of an ongoing source of disappointment to your supervisor when it comes to that sort of But look, let's get into that subjective side. Tell me about, and you've written about it too, so I'll get you to tell me about that first time, because I've read your blog. I'm going to show it up while you talk. And I do read a lot, and I got to say, it's a great read. And I'm plugging the hell out of your blog and your site, which I'll show while you're talking. But tell me about that. Let's go into that. How did you feel? What happened?
Yeah, well, I think my first one, I was so overwhelmed by the experience. So we traveled to France, and I had no idea. I mean, I knew that a total eclipse was going to be different and unique, and you pick up on the fact that it's really different, you know, just in the material that you read, but it's very hard because you can't describe what it's like. So I thought that I would, you know, really enjoy it. And so we got prepared and we went down to the coast of France, and we got our little nibbles, a bottle of wine, and we sat and we started watching it. And you have to use solar filters to watch the partial phases as totality comes in. And what I didn't know was going to happen was the change of the environment around me. So, as the moon's shadow, as the sun blocks the moon, it progresses over. It looks like a little Pac-Man, which gets bigger and bigger. And, the light started dimming. The temperature started to drop. The birds were actually active in a way I hadn't expected. So there was this really weird vibe in the environment that I really wasn't expecting at all. And, there was background music, which was sort of like providing a bit of a heartbeat drum beat to it too. And the last few moments before totality, everything changed so rapidly. I was not expecting that at all. It just suddenly got very dim, and this darkness was approaching, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I got goosebumps. Even talking now kind of always brings me to goosebumps, because it was so phenomenally unexpected. And then suddenly, bam, totality happens, and it's like the sun disappears, and you see this, it just takes a moment for your eyes to adjust, but you see this hole in the sky where the sun should be. And there's an image behind me there. That's kind of what you see. And it just looks like this eye looking down at you. And you can start to see the corona, the outer atmosphere of the sun, which is just stunningly beautiful. And I didn't know it was going to have that profound effect on me. So for those 2 minutes or so during totality, I was at one with the universe. There's no other way to describe it. And I'm a pretty rational person, and I had no idea. And, it was like if you want to use psychology terms, your ego dissolves. So you lose track of who you are, and then you become part of this collective experience. and you recognize you're insignificant, but part of something greater. And, you know, you feel connection and you feel this sense of time. Like time takes on a massive meaning during totality, because time feels like it stands still, but the world feels like it stopped, because, you know, all the rules of nature have turned. And what's normal is not normal. And you just know that this is just not the way the world should be. And, you know, that feeling of you're standing in that particular moment, but you understand what primitive people, our ancestors, would have felt had this happened. You know, that someone could have been standing at this exact same place, experiencing this exact same feeling thousands of years ago. And here I've got goosebumps. I mean, it's just that feeling of that connection. And, you know, you could be in the future also experiencing this too. So a sense of time just seems to be melded into this one specific moment. And then it's that feeling of the vastness, the huge vastness. And instead of feeling scared about that feeling of insignificance, it actually is such a powerful, powerful feeling, because you really feel you are insignificant apart something much, much greater. So you feel connected to this power. And I'm not a religious person, so I didn't have this religious experience about it, but I just put in the context of it's the universe, you know, it's the connection with the universe and our collective experience of humanity. And then totality, before you know it, then it ends, it's over. And then I remember turning to my partner and I just, my throat was choked up and I was, you know, people around me were in tears and I could not just verbalize what had just happened. And all I said was, you know, like, what was that? We've got to do this again. And I had no idea when the next eclipse was going to be, but I knew that this was something, I need to understand it and I need to experience it again, because it was so powerful. And it really did change my life. And so what I do, I talk to people about their first time eclipse experience, because I'm not the only one. It happens to people, you know, like there's commonalities in our experience. And so we talked about, you know, science and subjective experience. There's enough commonality in these subjective experiences during totality that there's a common thread amongst people. And so for whatever reason, some of us, when we experience this, it really changes our lives and we become eclipse chasers. And for other people, they can experience it and it can be very powerful and really amazing, but it doesn't grab them in the same way. And I guess as a psychologist, I'm always interested in what makes it, you know, why me and why other people don't have that pull to, you know, no matter what happens in their lives, that they have to be into the next path of totality.
Yeah, that is so cool. And for me, it's about what you've just explained is actually about uniting the individual. It's about the alpha and omega. It's about uniting apparent things that are apparently irreconcilable. Like, so you're an individual, you're the center of your own experience. Yet you experience this thing which makes you recognize your insignificance. Yet it connects you to the greater whole.
Yep.
A weird inverse way, actually making you feel better and more important.
Yep.
Like, it's so contradictory, yet it's true.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of like I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And if I can get a little bit of Jordan Peterson on kind of this one, I'm a great Jordan Peterson fan. I'm sorry, I don't know what your feelings are on him. Look, he introduced me to, like, I'd heard of Jung, I'd read a little bit of, you know, one or two Jung stuff, and I thought it was a little bit too kooky. But he kind of like brought me right back to Jung, and I want to start reading Piaget as well. So you know, this idea of melding again, and it comes back to what we were talking about before, melding the objective with the subjective, but get it right, not putting the subjective completely at the center, because I think that's a mistake. I really do. Like a lot of the policy that I'm reading now, a lot of the papers is like, I interviewed this one person, they experienced this. Therefore, it's like, well, okay, that person experienced this. And like you said, there's a common theme here. It's about, you know, this grandiose, you know, touching, but I don't know, do you really want to structure society around that one person's subjective? Like, you know,
yeah. And I guess you know, with totality, the difference is that commonality, that feeling that we have, that feeling of connection actually unites us. It allows us to understand how we're all the things that we have in common. So everything is stripped away. Our differences related to, individual politics or beliefs or where we come from or what language we speak or what religion people follow, all that's melded away, because at the end of the day, we are just these primitive people standing on one celestial body, appreciating the shadow of another celestial body that's passing over us. And, we have to be in awe of that. There is nothing, I don't believe there can be anything more powerful and positive that we can experience on this earth apart from that. I mean, how much bigger, what else can be bigger about that?
Yeah.
And these things, I mean, part of the reason why I like to research it is because, like, for me, I couldn't put words to that. It's not like I went home and understood that and was able to verbalize that. People asked me what I did, when I was away, and I was like, I just couldn't verbalize it. So, that's why you want to see another eclipse, I think, to make sense of the first one, because it's so overwhelming. You just have no idea what just happened. So you want to experience it again. And then when you experience it again and you have those same things, then you realize, oh my God, actually, this is something that affirms me in my life and where I'm at the moment. And it bonds everybody, and it allows me, I don't know, it's that feeling like it's a reinforcement of the good that can be done in the world. I don't know. These are still very difficult things for people to verbalize. And, there's a word for that. It's called the ineffable, the things we cannot describe. And so what I try and do in my research now, when I interview lots of people about their eclipse experience, is I try and put the words to the ineffable. And this time last year, I wrote an article for Aeon, AEON. And I think, it was really pulling out all these things and putting it into my first experience, coming from the position of what I know now and all the research that I've done to put words to it. And I think that it's probably one of the more powerful ones that I've written. And I think the link for that is available on my website.
And I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to plug it right here and right now.
Oh, you got it.
So there
it is. Yes.
So what is Aeon? Tell me.
I'm not able to answer that very fluently right now.
Okay.
But yes, they've got amazing original opinion pieces from, some really great thinkers, and it's a really impressive website. It's like a rabbit hole. You think you start on one article and then it just takes you into so many different areas. It really is pretty impressive, the catalog of articles that they have there. So highly recommend people go and spend a weekend or a week exploring the whole site. It's great. You learn things about things that you didn't even know you were interested in, because there's commonalities amongst everything.
Yeah, I'm a great Quillette fan, so I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So I too have fallen into the rabbit hole. I know how it feels. Yeah. But look, how did you? So you've started. You've talking about this passion that you've got, and you've kind of getting to the point where it's not just a hobby, that you're kind of making a living out of it. Can you discuss that?
Yeah, and I think it's not so much making a living from it. It's just the fact that I love the experience so much. And, as a psychologist, what I do is actually help people identify ways in which they can improve their lives or improve their way of thinking about their lives and putting things in context. And, so on one hand, I have this parallel career of that's what I do in my day job. And then when you get into the path of totality, all that is just bam, it just happens. And so you can't escape the parallels there. And I think over time, what I've been able to do is use my skill set from being a psychologist to be able to apply that to eclipse chasing. And I really am firmly of the belief that if everybody could experience a total solar eclipse, the world would be a better place. And so I'm all for about, I want to experience totality as much as I can. I'll be every single total eclipse I will get to. That's my default setting in my life from now on, the rest of my life. I know that for sure. But I also started to feel very compelled to help people understand what it's like so that they can get into the path of totality as well and make choices for themselves. And so I guess over time I started wanting to convey why it was so special and unique. And so I did that, and I published my first book. And then they say that once, you don't just publish one book. You publish one book and then you always think, okay, well, I could do so much different. I could, it leads to this and then this. So then, my next book was about trying to my third book then was about trying to convey the first time experience to really tease it out. But the total eclipse path happened in 2012 in North Queensland, where I'm sitting right now and where I'm from. And so for the first time as an eclipse chaser, instead of just traveling to a country, experiencing the eclipse and experiencing the culture and everything about that, and then going home, what I did was I came back home for 6 months. I was on the ground waiting for the moon's shadow to arrive. And, you know, that was so unique. And that gave me such a different perspective, because I was actually then lucky enough to be where the moon's shadow was passing. But I was interviewing the locals, and they didn't get it. They didn't understand it's going to be a big deal. They just felt it was, you know, a science event, and they couldn't relate to it. Or else they were picking up from the news articles. They were saying, you know, all the news articles were saying that the area was going to be inundated. There were going to be traffic problems. It was going to be a disaster. You may as well rent your house out and then go away. Science boffins were going to come and take over. You know, it had this sort of mystical science thing that, you know, nobody was communicating what it was all about, or the fact that this is a natural event that you will experience awe and its wonder. And, you know, we should embrace this opportunity. And really, you know, we're lucky to be in the path of totality. So I think when I recognized that when communities plan, there was this gap there. No one was able to convey what it was like to experience it, because there wasn't an eclipse chaser on the ground. So I started doing some work in media and events just to let people know. And I think after the eclipse, I was inundated with so many emails and phone calls and just people coming up to me saying, do you know, if it wasn't for you telling me about what it was like, I wouldn't have even gone outside, or I wouldn't have even stayed in the region. So there's something about the personal storytelling which was really powerful for people, that they needed to hear that, you know what, this is awesome. This is, you will experience awe and wonder. And so I kind of then felt when communities plan for eclipses, they really have to convey this element as well. And so from that point, I started to become involved, not so much about even communicating what it's like, but also then how do communities prepare? So I sort of teased out what was important. And then I was able to, in the Path of Totality in the Faroe Islands for 2015, I was able to actually go there and say, do you know what, this is how you really promote the eclipse. This is how you get your community involved in it. Because it's a community event. You know, your whole community is lucky enough to be in the path, the moon's shadow. And people will come and join you for that. And it's going to be a big celebration, but we have to really, you can align your community development to this opportunity and really make it very powerful. And so I did that in 2015, and it was incredible to be part of such a remote community. I was going to say bringing this, no, it happens anyway, but just, you know, helping coordinate the response to it. And from that, I learned so many more lessons about how we can do this effectively for others. And from then I put together a white paper on community eclipse planning, because in 2017, the Path of Totality was going right across the US. There were over 1,000 communities, each planning for totality. And they hadn't had a total eclipse in the US for about 40 years. And so no one really knew how to go about it. And so I thought, well, in the absence of anyone else providing this leadership, I can put something together as a guide, as a starting point. And I was able to do that. And I was starting then to consult with communities across the path. And, you know, when you do the things you love to do, when you see a gap and you just think, you know, I can do this, I've got the skill set to do this. It's so rewarding and powerful, and you're helping people along, and it just feels so great. And then one thing leads to another, so yeah, I'm actually at the moment now finalizing my second version of the white paper on community eclipse planning. Future paths are going to cross in Australia and also in the US. There's two big ones coming up in the US again, and Spain and Iceland. So these are the countries that I'm going to be sort of highlighting. Hey, this is, you know, you've got to get things prepared a few years in advance here, and this is going to be a big thing, and you're going to get so many people involved, and it's going to be memorable for a whole lifetime, you know.
And that is incredible. And you're right, it is. I mean, I've only been same sort of thing as you. I had it on my bucket list, and I was in Cohen for the I was in Cohen there, we only got like about, I think it was 2 or 3 minutes in the main shadow. And it was exactly as you described it. Like I was kind of sitting there thinking, oh, this is going to be cool. And next thing, you know, I saw this shadow coming towards me, like this wall of shadow. And I'm like, what the? And all the birds started getting weird. It got really cold. It changed. I don't remember if there was actually a breeze or anything that with it, or perhaps that was just I don't know, but it was, dude, it was, you know, and I actually had to travel to Laura just outside. So I had to travel to Laura to get actually inside that shadow area.
Yeah.
Which for me was a couple of hours drive at the time. And I was the officer in charge of a police station. I had to leave my subordinate there. He was like, luckily he was good enough to indulge my geekiness. And I was like, dude, can't, you know, because we can kind of, he's like, no. And I'm like, bucket. He's like, no, he didn't get it. Fair enough, you know. And after I came back with sore eyes and I had to sleep, because although I did have the glasses and all that, man, my eyes were still aching like all heck.
Safety alert here.
Yeah.
Safety alert, because it's so important. You can never look at the sun with your naked eye. You actually have to use solar filters in the partial phases, but during the total phase, if you're in the path of totality, it is absolutely okay and safe to view with the naked eye. Like the image behind me, you can see that the moon is completely covering the sun, so that there's no potential damage there. Your eyes are safe. But yes, if you look during the partial phases and you do not have solar filters on, you will damage your eyes.
Yeah. No, look, I did. I just had those little glass, you know, those ones they hand out. I put 2 of them.
Yeah.
But it's still, man, look, I'm sure I damaged my eyes. I've got to be honest. Look, that's why. But
well, there's so many people chasing eclipses over the world. There are so many solar researchers. You can absolutely view safely. So you don't need to damage your eyes. You don't need to hurt your eyes. It will not hurt. So yeah, just thought I'd mention that there now. Good.
Yeah. Don't do what Matt did.
Don't do what Matt did.
But yeah, get a planet. Actually, call a planet. But because I have another question, I want to kind of link on to what events eclipses have been linked with historically, because there is a Shirley MacLaine feel to this. You know, that quasi kind of, you said, you know, you're not religious, but it's a kind of spiritual, transcendent kind of experience.
Yep.
But are you, and I don't know precise details, but are you able to, like this hobby, traveling around the world and doing this community organizing, and I imagine it'd be pretty expensive. Are you able to monetize it? If you don't mind me asking that, is it something you've been able
to? I'm asked this a lot because, you know, sometimes you'll get a random comment in your social media feed saying, well, if I was paid to travel around the world to do this, I'd do it as well. And it's never, it's not about money, actually. Eclipse chasers spend things, we focus on different priorities. It's because we have these experiences that show us that meaning, that experiences are so much more powerful than tangible things. So that's why eclipse chasers seem to be very, you know, you meet another chaser and there's so much commonality there. We have the same mindset that money is not the be all and end all. The money is something that can be used to provide experiences that allow you to have a really rich life, even if you do not have that much money. So you will find that it's not about, it's about prioritizing. So I don't spend a lot on any other things in my life. You know, my priority is actually spending on getting into the path of totality. That is my number one priority. And you know, so some of these eclipse tours or, you know, independent travel to get into the path can be a little expensive, because the path of totality can occur in any location around the world, even off grid. So, you know, sometimes you actually have to spend a lot to get into these locations. For example, we're talking about Outer Mongolia, or, you know, in the middle of or Madagascar, or, you know, sometimes it's overpopulated areas like the US, but, you know, often they can be expensive. So usually a typical independent travel might cost a couple of thousands of dollars. If you're joining a tour, you know, and some people, sometimes it's important to join a tour because you don't have the resources or the time to be able to plan everything out yourself and travel independently. But the costs can be a bit greater because there needs to be more resources. So you need transport to get to where you need to get to. You need accommodation So, you know, they can be a little bit more expensive travel, but, you know, eclipse chasers don't then, you know, we make choices in other parts of our lives so that we have the resources to be able to do what we would like to do. And sometimes I'm lucky enough, you know, like I think some eclipse chasers, when they've got special skills or their knowledge set, they can apply their expertise and then somehow monetize or at least break even on their costs. Yeah. And so, you know, most of us are in this situation. So, you know, I don't earn a fortune doing what I do. I do it because I love it. But, you know, I lecture, I do presentations, I do, you know, in community workshops. Those are the things that can be paid, but that offsets the 99% of the things that I do for free. So it's not like you need a huge amount of money to be able to do the things you enjoy. And if you ask anyone, you know, what is your passion? Is it, you know, are you into sports or whatever? You will find that people will prioritize spending on those things that they enjoy. And it has to be said that there are some paths of totality that are very difficult and very expensive. For example, the next total solar eclipse that's visible is in December, and the path of totality actually is only visible over Antarctica. And to get there, your only options are very expensive flights, you know, flights that go over, you know, intersect in the air, or these very, very long and expensive cruise ships. You know, I mean, you're talking about $15,000, $20,000. And for a lot of people, that's out of reach. So, you know, sometimes we have to make those decisions. You know what? That's just not possible for me. And that's okay. You know, we will do all we can to try and get into the path of totality. So over time, because of what I've done and the, you know, I do a huge amount of media and I convey a lot about eclipses, and I do a lot of education and training and workshops. I lead eclipse tours now. So luckily, that you know, some of the places that I've been able to go to have, you know, because I've been a tour leader, that's allowed me to be able to do that. So never think it's just about money, or never think it's about something that only rich people do, because that's not quite true.
Yeah, but it is reassuring to know though that you can generate an income from it. So it's something that kind of it funds the addiction. Would perhaps be a good way of putting it. And considering you're the kind of like St. Paul of eclipse chasers, in the same way that you know, he had to make tents and do what he had to do to kind of like get the word out. It seems to me that that's what you're doing there. So not so much nothing wrong with profit either. Like, you're not talking on socialist here, but you're not profiteering in the sense you're funding the passion.
Yeah, I think it's just that thing that I know for the rest of my life I'll be chasing eclipses. And, you know, I don't go off on other, you know, like when I think about holidays that other people might go on, they might spend whatever they do on other holidays. My main travel now is really focused on getting into the path of totality. So, and that's what you'll find most other eclipse chasers will do. They will just prioritize that. And you know, these are choices and things that anyone can make. So it's never about money. So I think that's one of the questions that my initial reaction is, you know, like I'm not some rich person. I'm just typical, normal, everyday person doing what I love to do. It's just that if you want something, you will make it happen. You will find a way of making it happen. If you really, if it's really important to you, you will prioritize it.
Yeah, and look, you know, for complete clarity, that's what I was trying to imply. And incidentally, like I said too, even if you were making a healthy profit out of it and funding a home, I'd say good on you. Like, I wouldn't see that as a negative side of things. I don't see that as an exploitation. I see that as someone harnessing their passion, something that they're good at, something they have to offer other people, and being able to support their lifestyle. Fantastic. Like, you know, I wish everyone could kind of do that. Look, there's always been this association of eclipses with the kind of negative side of things, really. But have there been events in the past that eclipses have been linked with historically positively? Can you give any sort of historical context of that? Can you talk to us a bit about that?
About the positive side? Well, I guess historically, if you look at historical records, the words that people use, you know, it's that awe mixed with terror. That's a common thing, you know, because of all the things I mentioned before, you know, the world changes, the sun disappears, it goes away. And if you didn't know, if this come out of the blue, it would be terrifying. You know, if you didn't understand what was going on, it would be absolutely terrifying, because the moon, you know, the sun disappears, and how do you know it's going to come back? Those minutes during totality must have been so frightening for people who did not understand. But even when you do understand, that primal fear is still there. You know, it's ominous. That shadow approaching, it just feels wrong. You know, it's this sense of things are not right with the world, I guess. You know, and your body picks up on it. Your primitive brain picks up on it. And because there are all those things like changes of light and the changes in temperature, birds change, you know, so that there are things that it's not just human beings, other mammals respond as well.
Mm.
And historical records always have that feeling of terror. And I was fascinated by the word awful, because when you think about that, I mean, the totality experience is awful. It's full of awe. It is very, very powerful. But the word awful now refers to something that's negative. Whereas totality, when you understand that what's happening, actually, it's very thrilling and exciting, and we can see the positives in it. So off the top of my head, I'm not immediately thinking of any positive turning point that's happened because of the total solar eclipse.
But I'd have to agree, in the etymology that you discussed is kind of on that too, because when you do see something that's truly terrifying and it's got your full attention, you're terrified by it and kind of impressed by it at the same time. It's like, wow, that is so cool. It's like, oh my God, I hope it's not going to eat me. You know what I mean? Like I've seen some crocodiles close up, and I had a shark buzz me when I was out diving once, and he come right up, man, like checking me out. You know what I mean? He was thinking lunch, and I was looking like I made eye contact with this creature, like as it came out. I'll really quickly tell the story rather than babble this. It kind of give a degree of context. I lived up in the Torres Straits for a couple of years. There's this rock called Hammond Rock, right in between Hammond Island and the Torres Straits. Great line fishing area, but I'm not much of a line fisherman. So we pulled up there, and I was with a whole bunch of guys, including, of course, a whole bunch of Torres Strait Island guys. I said, "Oh, guys, I'm going to dive on this rock." And the two guys were like, "No, don't back."
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no. And I'm like, no, because you could see right down this cobalt blue water. And it was deep water, don't get me wrong, like it was really deep water. But I could just tell by the fall of the rocks and stuff that, man, there was going to be crazy in there. And there was going to be all sorts of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm dripping in the mouth. And the guy's like, do not go in there. This is shark country. Okay, do not do that. And I'm like, I hadn't been diving long, and I was at that too cocky stage. I'm like, yeah, no. So I pulled in, hit the water, and blew my snorkel, readjusted. And in the time it tells to say, hit the water, so I looked up, and there's about 7-knot current coming around this rock. And with the current, because obviously this shark has heard me go in the water, and he's like, oh, I'm going to go have a look at that. And he's come like a motive train, dude, coming right at me. And this thing was only about 2 meters, only a little bit bigger than me. I'm just on 6 foot imperial, 182 centimeters. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my, it was awful. Like I was filled full of awe. I was really impressed and really scared at the same time. And it come right up to me and it looked at me as it went past and went, nah. But yeah, you're not worth the effort. But he was thinking of it, man. Like I had that connection. Like it was thinking, it was doing the maths in its head, the law of diminishing returns, risk. Is this thing going to fight me?
Gosh, what an incredible moment. But even what you're describing there, it taps into every single element I was talking about during a total eclipse experience, right? Because, that sense of time, how I said time compresses?
Yeah.
And that old cliche that, before you die, your life flashes before your eyes. It's that thing that you kind of, everything is anchored in that one moment. You are 100% purely present in that moment. And all your senses are alive and taking every single moment in, because your primitive brain is saying danger, like, I've got to pay attention. I've got to have every element on alert here. And the awe experience is actually something that is, it's positive, tinged with that terror. And it allows us to really accommodate new ways of thinking. So, we think in one way before that happens, but afterwards it's like our thinking, we think outside the box. It changes you as a person. And that's kind of what you are talking about. And you see, when you talked about that, you came alive as well, didn't you? It's like part of you is still there in that moment.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. But the good thing is, like, being in the because I'm just coming out of the Queensland Police, and there's a couple of other moments like that involving humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I've mentioned this a few times, so like I'm not going to delve on it kind of too much. Not the near death experiences, I haven't spoken about that, but like being in the police, it's a good thing, because I get why people like when I'm talking to army vets, like I knew a lot of World War II veterans, and when I say World War II veterans, I don't just mean people who experience combat. One of my over the back neighbour, he was a Lancaster tail bomber. He did an entire tour over Germany, missions, when their average life expectancy was 7 missions. He won the DFC, the Distinguished Flying Cross, for valour in action. His wife was a Cockney from the East End who had the heck bombed out of her. And towards the end, like, she lived right through the Blitz, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Both of them, for them, those years were just nothing compared to it, you know what I mean? Everything before was like cool, they have memory, but everything afterwards was a bit of a kind of downer. Like, that's when they had meaning and point. That's when they had focus. And it was terrible. And when they were in it, they wished they were out of it. But now that it's over, they kind of, you could see that part of them want to go back.
Yeah.
And I talk to, like, because us coppers, like, anytime you, like, if you have something where it's like, man, that was close. and I'm not going to talk it up. People have only tried to kill me, like actively kill me, not like I've been in dangerous circumstances where like I could have died 3 times, which in 30 years isn't too bad. Once every 10 years, someone tries to kill me. That's not so bad, really. No, I'm not being flippant. I'm not being ironic. Like, that's considering the nature of what I, I put in my papers yesterday, actually, what I used to do. It's not so bad. It's not so bad. And the army guys, because we've got a lot of vets who are in the police, and I'm getting to know a few more veterans anyway. They're all like that. It's all a bit of a downer. Like, I understand why they get not so much PTSD, because you can actually get as you said before, you can get post-traumatic growth. You can become a better person.
Yes. Yeah.
Having gone through terrible things.
Yes, because it expands the way you think about things. And I can't speak from the vet experience, obviously, but all the things you're talking about, that sense of once you've experienced high adrenaline, high emotion, and that mind expanding when you're there purely in the moment, survival mode, it can it floods you with those intense feelings and emotions, and it then peaks and then leaves a trough, like a gap then. And compared to all those experiences, eclipse chasing is actually very safe and contained, and nowhere near that. So I'm not minimizing any of those experiences at all.
No, but it is the same. I'm going to jump in here because I think you're being self-deprecating.
Yeah, but what I am going to say is that the process is similar, and that we talk about the post-eclipse blues, like because you spend your 2 years or something playing moment, you're there and it's awesome and it's amazing, and you go through this amazing roller coaster of emotions, and then it's over, and then you just think when's the next one, and then things start to die down and you just think, oh. So we do joke about the post-eclipse blues, but then that's why the title of my first book was Total Addiction, The Life of an Eclipse Chaser, because there is something about, when's the next one? And we can have positive addictions in our life. So for example, if you're a runner, for example, you would know that, it's torture and pain, but actually you get a buzz from it. And so there are things in our life that happens that can become positive addictions, but they can be damaging too if it gets to the point where you're spending all your money on this, and to the extent that you're not looking after yourself in other ways, then that is a problem. So like with any addiction, that is the case. But yeah, there are things that happen in our lives that are very meaningful and powerful for us that then allows us to have a bit of a gap. And we joke amongst eclipse chasers that once you've seen, because everyone is different, everyone is unique, and so it's not like you get that desensitization to it, because there's enough in the environment that's different. There's always something new you can experience. You can experience in a crowd, or you can go to a place where there is no man-made item there at all, so you're just in pure nature. You know, you can experience it with your loved ones or completely on your own. So there are so many varieties, but we joke about having an eclipse virgin nearby. So, and what that means is it's someone who's never seen totality before. They don't really know what's going to happen, and then when it happens, they get very excited. And so sometimes we joke that, you know, if there's an eclipse virgin nearby, that you can actually vicariously experience that first time again through their emotion. But I personally, you know, I've had 12 total eclipses. I don't have that feeling that I've distinguished or extinguished that emotion, not at all. Like it's still there, but there are little jokes. Like every community has their little jokes, don't they?
Yeah. No, I tell you, it's a life-defining thing, and like for me, it was. But honestly, it kind of like I genuinely rate it right up there. It's not exactly the same, but like it clicked. I got that feeling, and I haven't quite become an. I do hope you pardon me for saying this. I haven't quite become an eclipse dirty rotten slut, but when I lost my eclipse virginity, it was such a moment, Kate. But I don't like talking about it. But it clicked. It clicked the same, because you can kind of feel it. It's like, you know, it's clicking the same. Clicking the same systems. It really is. Like, we are that mix of that biological creature that's been mixed with that sensation. That's something that's more than just. It's more than just adrenaline. It's more than just hormones. It's more than just electrons clicking through your brain. I'm not saying those things aren't happening, but there's something more to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because the other thing that us chasers laugh about is it mirrors the sexual response as well. And if you can go online now and look at any experience of totality, because so many people now post their moments, and I sometimes use some of them in my lectures or presentations, because I always put a warning saying, you know, if you weren't watching the visuals and you just had the audio on, you would think you're watching a porn film, because, you know, just listen to the crowd, because you can tell, you know, like the peak comes, and then, you know, like then it happens. So there are some.
It's an orgasm.
It absolutely is. And then it's the downer afterwards, and then it's that feeling of, oh well, you know, post-eclipse cigarette perhaps.
They're all holding hands, looking at
and I talk about that in my first book as well. Like there are the similarities. There's the you know, the physiological response is similar, and it's the other similarity is with some mind altering drugs and chemicals like LSD, for example. Psilocybin. And there is research now coming out, and in fact there's much more understanding about the use of these biochemicals on mental health and awareness. So it's really good, exciting things, because there's a recognition that not only does it give you a little bit of a high, but it can actually lead to some long-term changes if it's done appropriately and ethically, and, you know, when you know you can guide someone through it, because someone can actually experience a negative event from these things. And in my third book, I interviewed and I wrote up the experience of someone who was comparing it to, you know, a totality experience to drug taking. And he basically summarized by saying, you know what, it is the most clean, pure experience that I've had. So he recognized he doesn't need to use drugs anymore. There's no need to put chemicals in your body when you can have this experience in such a natural way that stays with you. So yeah.
And that's it too, you know, and people are searching for that in this modern materialistic world where science, which is a great tool, and I'm a science geek. Like I truly am, like, you know, one of those, you know, like Scientific American. I read as much as I can for that. when it's linked with materialism alone, it just takes something away. You know what I mean? It's just, it's just not quite there. It just, and I think that's why, like when you look at, it's funny that we live in times that all the physical needs are taken care of, all the physical, yet we're getting an epidemic of suicide. We're getting an epidemic of drug use. Our fertility rates are falling. And to me, there's no better example. It's like, if you're not having kids, it's not, if you're killing yourself and you're looking for meaningless pleasure and you're not having kids, there is no better way of saying that's nihilism incarnate. That's nihilism incarnate. And it really is like, it's kind of trite, but it's true. You want that kick and every human being needs it. But you don't, like, you're not going to get it at the point of a needle. You're not. It's going to take you so far, but it's not the same. You're not going to get that meaning and point. And you can find it in stuff like this. And you can find it because, there's been this interaction here between spirituality and religion and talking about it. You can find it in a church, or you can find it in those sorts of things, but you're not going to, and that's the only thing that's going to drag you out of the meaningless of meaningless nihilism.
Yeah, and in fact, where Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which
I love it.
Very, very powerful book. Yeah, and highly recommend, because it's a fundamental. It's an absolute great book. But we are meaning-making machines. As humans, we try and make sense of our experiences, and if you don't have any positive things to draw upon, then you can get stuck in this cycle of negativity. And because life can be harsh. Life is about suffering. The Greek story of Sisyphus, where he's condemned to actually push that boulder up the hill, and then it rolls down, and that's his punishment. Life can be a bit like that. So it's about trying to figure out how to make how we can make meaning, have meaningful experiences in our life, so it's not just about suffering.
That's right. And considering that Frankl was a Holocaust survivor, he was at Auschwitz.
Yep. And yes, because no matter how difficult your circumstances can be, there's a turning point in his book about, just seeing a bird, the beauty of nature and a bird just flying in. So no matter our circumstances, we can all find meaning. It's just how we go about it. And I think us eclipse chasers have figured out that this is something that's really important to us. And so when we see maps of the path of totality that covers the world and future, and there is a map that I've given to you, if you pull up Michael Zieler's maps. Michael Zieler is another eclipse chasing man who's based in the US, who has a whole skill set on mapping, and he does amazing maps, and his website is greatamericaneclipse.com. But he really allows us to visualize everything. So on this map here, I look at that. So these are the paths of eclipses from 2011 to 2060. So, and any one location, the path of totality only happens once in every 375 years. But you can see then that this is why we have to travel to experience it. But this is like a map of my life. Like, this is a scaffold where I'm going to be. So Matt, if you want to know where I'm going to be, and you just pick one of these paths, and you'll pretty much guarantee that that's where I'll be. You can call me from those places. But it, to me, is such a comforting thing, because it's like the world is there. There's so much meaning in a map like that. And it provides a sense of safety and containment and connection, and allows me to experience I'm a human of the world rather than just belonging to one individual location. So I love that.
Yeah, and this idea that, yes, you are a dot and you're insignificant, but you're not meaningless, and there's no, well, you are a dot, but that doesn't mean that you're insignificant.
Yes, that insignificance, because when people feel insignificant and powerless, that's what leads to depression and anxiety and a lot of mental ill health. But when we have that sense of meaningless and insignificance, but we know that it's not related to who we are as a person, when we feel that connection to something greater, that's when it can be life-enhancing, powerful, affirmative. And you mentioned post-traumatic growth before, and that is definitely a thing. And, in my clinical practice, that's what we do. That's my daily life, trying to encourage people to be able to find their post-traumatic growth. And they do get there. They really do get there. Some people have the resources to be able to do it themselves, but some people need a little bit of guidance along the way.
Exactly. Hey, look, you sent me some photographs and I've got some more questions, but I think that we'll cover off on the questions if we just go through the photographs. Can I just run through the photographs and can you talk to them?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that. Who's this poor chap with a shirt saying Eclipse Chaser Chaser? Like,
this is my long-suffering husband. Now, so we have seen every total solar eclipse together. Oh, except the last one in 2019. He was not there. But he was right beside my side for the very first eclipse, and we've seen most of them together. And, you know, I was caught up in this moment of oneness with the universe. And, you know, at the end of it, I turned to him and we were talking about it. He got that sense, but it didn't completely connect him with him in the same way that it did to me. So we have this little joke that I'm the eclipse chaser. And because he comes with me anywhere I go, he's an eclipse chaser. So sometimes we bring out the t-shirts and actually highlight that. And, you know, and it just highlights that idea that not everybody, it doesn't generate this sense of buzz and excitement and life-changing, or that, you know, not everybody gets like me and has that for this. I believe everybody has something that will generate that, and it's up to them to find it. But for me, that's what this is. But yes, that's him. And you can tell by, you know, the amount of hair. He's got a lot of hair on that photo.
Yeah.
He was in Game of Thrones, and, you know, like he does different things that bring him a sense of awe and meaning, as well as chase eclipses as well. He thinks it's pretty cool. But if it wasn't for me, he doesn't think that he would be spending all of his life chasing the way I do.
Yeah. And, you know, yeah, something that it sounds like he shares, he's rather like my spouse. He gets punished for his only real sin, and that's having bad taste in spouses.
Oh, I would say he's got good taste myself.
Well, my poor long-suffering wife, I'm sure she just, let's keep going. So,
this is a summary basically of what I've done. So I think we've talked about this before. Most chasers chase total eclipses. Can I just say, annular eclipses are interesting, but they don't have that same or that level of immersement that total eclipses have. But we talked about me being a clinical psychologist. I've written several books. All of this is on my website. Yeah.
Which we're definitely going to plug.
And the thing is, you know, if you just go back, one of the things that, you know, you mentioned my title before, I think sometimes it can be useful to have an academic background and a professional background, because I actually do have a very professional job. You know, I am evidence-based in what I do. I'm very grounded.
Totally.
You know, but there's this side as well. And I think it gives credibility to this, because I think sometimes you'll come across people, you know, whether they're standing on a street corner with a sign saying the end is near, end is nigh, or, you know, sometimes people can come across as a little bit loopy, or whatever word you want to describe it. And I think when we talk about the eclipse experience, people can come across that way, because if you can't relate to it, then the only assumption we have is there's something wrong with that person. And I think that's what the power of drawing upon my academic background to what I do is, because people feel like they can take me seriously. You know, they can listen to what I'm saying, because there's evidence that it's not just me. You know, I'm putting words to something that people can relate to. And like you know, you were able to say, well, do you know, I felt something similar in this situation. So it's about that credibility to be able to convey this excitement. And I don't mind going out there and making a little bit of a fool of, well, not a fool, but, you know, being excited and sharing, conveying that sense of wonder and awe, because this is a very science-dominated narrative in the media about, you know, this is a science event, these are the facts and figures, but actually I convey it, it's a human experience. So move on to the next one.
Yeah, actually, mate, I really want to validate that, actually. You know, you're kind of spot on with that. And one of the things that I try and do is cultivate curiosity. And if you have someone that's got that enthusiasm, serious, authentic enthusiasm is really, really infectious. And you've got infectious enthusiasm about you, Kate. Like it's real, and like you said, it does give that authenticity. I'm not making, this will sound analogies, but it's not. I interviewed some UFO people. Okay, I'm not saying like, you know, but of course, you know, UFOs are always considered kind of kooky, and I'm not going to say whether or not they, you know, there's people visiting us or not. That's not the issue, and that's not what I'm here to say. But I spoke to these two people who were just so enthusiastic about it, and one of them is a professor of God, what is it? Oh, he lectures down in Sydney, and he's head of MUFON. And like this, he's like he's not a brain surgeon, but I've forgotten his exact. Yeah, he does research on the brain, and he's a qualified, published, really well respected professor. It's just to have, I had the enthusiastic person, and this kind of like this guy as well, Dr. Stankovic, the guy's name is really cool. Anyway, tell me about.
When you find your passion, I mean, you can just talk about it. You know, it's there. And I think the lucky ones are like us, that we find our passion, that we're able to channel a lot of our energies and, you know, experience the wonder, almost like childlike wonder, and convey that. So that's good. So this is an example of, and this photo is a beautiful photo taken by a fellow chaser, Jeff Sims, who's Australian. And this is of the moon's shadow for the eclipse in 2012. He was based near Pompeyrour. And I love these landscape photos because it actually shows so much more about the feel of it. And I say in all my presentations and media that, you know, total solar eclipse happens above you, around you, and within you, because I think that conveys it very well. And this is a really good photo for that, because you know, you're watching the moon move in front of the sun, you're seeing the solar corona. So there's a lot of things that you can see there. There's these beads, there's chromosphere, it's just incredible. From, you know, like it's just so beautiful. But that's not the only thing you see, because when you look around you, so you can actually see the shadow cone. Can you see that, like how it's curved around? That is the moon's shadow. That's the path of the moon's shadow. Wow. And like when you actually think about that, and this is, you know, that's why I spend a lot of time thinking about how I could brand what I do. And I'm being in the shadow. And, you know, it is about being in the shadow, and I'm a human being in the shadow, because that's the shadow of the moon. If you think about that, that is just incredibly mind-blowing. But you also get that 360-degree light around the horizon. So, you know, it's dark enough for like a full moon night. You can see stars and planets in the sky, but there is that horizon light around, and it's beautiful. So that's why you have to see more than one total solar eclipse, because you can't take it all in all at once. So, you know, sometimes you do have to then tear your eyes away from what's in front of you and turn around, watch the environment change. Make a choice to actually watch the shadow creep in from behind you. You know, like there's just so much to do and experience. And I don't take photographs during totality like this, but there are amazing photographers who do this, and they get to experience it as well as photograph. For me, I feel that if, you know, totality, the power of totality is that you're fully immersed in that moment. So anything that happens that takes your brain away from that, I think personally reduces that ability to be fully at one. And for me, totality time is just too precious to lose, I guess. So I'm very, very grateful to all the photographers.
Yeah, for me, it was like I said, I think one of the most amazing things, again, it was really, really amazing. But if you held a gun in my head and said, tell me what the most amazing thing was, it's watching that shadow.
Yeah.
It's coming at you literally, I don't know how many thousand kilometers an hour.
Yep.
But fast, it's like, it's sweeping towards you. It's like, oh my God, that's just, it's like the finger of God. It's just,
and you prickle and you feel it, because it's ominous. It's and you understand the terror, the awe that people would have talked about before. It's quite something. But, you know, the physical responses of being excited versus terrified is pretty much the same. You know that. The only difference is how we think about it. So, you know, we're able to understand it and think about it in a way because we appreciate what's going on, but we still feel that, you know, we still feel that intensity. So this is a beautiful photograph of totality. And so this is taken by Phil Hart, who's another Australian chaser. He does amazing photographies. at photography. And this is a composite image, which means that they overlay several images together to recreate the naked eye view. So sometimes, especially on social media now, particularly after the last lunar eclipse, you've got some images that are really unnaturally, they're almost artistic impressions of eclipses rather than what you see. But these photographers try and capture what you see with the naked eye. And so you can see the silvery ethereal light around the eclipsed sun, and that's the solar corona. And the solar corona is very different for each total solar eclipse. So sometimes, so you see that one in 2012, it looked like a flower. It was just beautiful, circular. Sometimes it's really elongated. So it's really nice to be able to experience them differently. And us chasers can look at a photograph and we can sort of remember which eclipse it's from just by looking at the features of the corona.
Oh, and that was okay.
Yes. So for us Aussies, I wanted to put this map in because, do you know what? We're going to be really lucky. For the next 20 years, we've got quite a few eclipses that are going to be visible. So there's on this map, there are total eclipses, which are the yellow lines, and then annular eclipses, which is the orange lines. And they're actually a bit hard to distinguish, but you'll see the path over North Queensland in 2012. So that's the one that we saw back in 2012, where I showed those photos that you featured. Mm-hmm. The next total solar eclipse that's visible from Australia, if you look at the pink line, so it goes across Western Australia and into Indonesia, and that's April 2023. And it's pink because it's called a hybrid eclipse. And all that means is that path of totality, that path is total for most of it, but at sunrise and sunset, it's an annular. So it just means that not the whole path is a total solar eclipse, but where everyone will experience it, it will be a total solar eclipse. And it's just clipping that Exmouth Peninsula there. Yeah. So us eclipse chasers are going to be congregating there or in the ocean, just, in the sea around that region, getting into the pink line. So that's what we're chasing. And the next opportunity. Yeah. And, no matter what happens with COVID, us Aussies are going to be okay, right? Unless Western Australia closes, we've got to get there beforehand. But it's good because, we know that that's an opportunity coming up. And the one after that, you'll try and find the 2028 pathway. So it starts in Western Australia and then it goes across Northern Territory, down Queensland, and then crosses Sydney. So that path is actually going to be a huge eclipse in Australia, because there are going to be a lot of people in New South Wales, high population area down there, who will experience it. But us eclipse chasers, we look at the whole path and we look at several features, and then we make a decision about where we go to experience each eclipse. So chasers probably won't go to Sydney to experience it. We're more likely to go to other areas. But there's no doubt Australians will be able to experience that one very easily. And then, if you look at 37, it goes across from Perth, north of Perth, or right across the whole country. And then 38. And I also missed 2030 as well. So we've got quite a few coming up in the next 2 decades.
Wow. Yep, that is so cool. All right, next. Yeah, we did that one. Oh yeah, Americans.
Yeah. So the next couple of years, actually, there's a lot of focus on the US, and I'm on a solar eclipse task force planning for the US eclipses. So you'll see the path of totality in 2017. It's the top one that goes across from Oregon down to the Carolinas. So that was, they called it the Great American Eclipse because they hadn't had one in over 30, almost 40 years. But it crossed, the coast from east to west, and it was, west to the east coast. And so many people saw that. It was pretty impressive. It was the largest event that they had that people witnessed in the US. It was huge. And in 2023, they've got an annular eclipse, which is the path that goes down. Yep. And then 2024, the path goes up through Mexico and up and out through Canada. So that 2023 and 2024, there's a lot of planning that's already started. So I'm on a task force that helps coordinate planning, because there are thousands of communities that are each individually preparing their everyone who lives there for this experience. So there's a lot of focus just in the next few years on these eclipses in the US.
God, I hope one of them goes across Roswell. That would be so cool.
One of them does. One of them is around that region. So
no kidding.
Yeah. So you'll find, no matter what your interests are, you'll be able to find, mixing your interest with the path of totality, I think.
Oh,
so
dude, imagine being at Roswell when that happens, man. That'd be like man, the people watching would probably be more interesting.
Well, that's the thing. That's why people plan in advance, and you need to plan in advance because you need to get the word out there. Because already, now that you've got that notion, you're going to be Googling and looking it up, and you'll find that there are things already in motion for that. So
cool.
And that's obviously in Western Australia, where it goes across Exmouth, the Cape Peninsula there.
Yep. Okay, Exmouth, that's the place. I think that was all the photographs that you sent me. Hang on, just let me check. Yes.
Okay.
That's it. Well, look, mate, I'm really, really enjoying this, but I think I've pumped all the information I can out of you.
Oh, there's more. I could talk forever.
Well, see that again, that's infectious enthusiasm though. That the whole thing about this is that infectious enthusiasm, and it's real. And one of the great things about Northern Vibe is, I've grown because I've been able to speak to people who are really, really enthusiastic. There are a couple of groups that I really want to get on. There are these fungi followers. There are these people in Cairns that anytime it gets on the rain, like they're calling each other and they go running out in the bush and they're taking photographs of fungi. And
excellent.
You get them talking about the fungi, and it's so cool. Again, you get that, oh yes, and that's a mycelium. Oh yeah. And then there was a split. One of the other things but it ended up being one of the reasons I can't kind of do it. There's actually a split. I won't go into that, but it's like, no, we're not talking to these guys. It's like, okay, it's the Crips versus the Bloods, man. It's Israel and Palestine right there.
But I mean, that taps into what we talked about before, that, no matter what your passion or area of interest is, if you find it, you're very lucky, and you can delve in as much as you want, and you can spend your life actually going into the nuances of it, whether it's, fungi or eclipse chasing or sports or storm chasing, tornado chasers, swimmers, free diving, or whatever it is, whatever your thing is. And I think we're lucky if we can find our passion and we can find our community and find our fellow like-minded individuals. And if you can sort of mix a bit of your career and what you normally do in your professional life into what you do over here, then it just makes for a really satisfying, meaningful life. Just go get into the path of totality at some point in your life, because you will never, ever, ever regret it.
Yep. And you've got a web page. So if people want to find your books, which I do recommend because I've read a couple of your articles and they're great, incidentally. So how can they, if they just Google Dr. Kate Russo, will it come up?
Yep, it will come up. My website is beingintheshadow.com. And if you're on Facebook, it's Being in the Shadow is the handle. So you can find me there. If you follow me there, then if there's anything that comes up that's of interest, because in the next few weeks, there's a few big things happening. So if you are interested in chasing the next eclipses, and you're in Australia especially, do make a point of following, because some exciting announcements are going to be made. So beingintheshadow.com.
Okay, no worries. And I'm just going to pull that up. There it is. So, and this is the Facebook. So if you just get on the search Facebook and Being in the Shadow or Dr. Kate Russo, it will come up.
Yep, Being in the Shadow, it will come up.
Thanks very much. And I don't know who's going to be on next week, but at this point, we'll wrap it up. Really appreciate all the listeners for Northern Vibe. Please like and share if you've enjoyed this interview. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Really great to be here. Thanks.